Hi. Today we're going to be talking about part 2 of healing from spiritual abuse. Specifically, we're going to be talking a little bit about how to tell the difference between right and wrong based on an outside gauge of myself. So I'm going to use how to tell what's truly wrong based on the Word of God versus what people have made up to be right or wrong. Like, how can you gauge that? Now, I am specifically talking to Christians here because this is the path I've chosen. But if that is not your path and that is not what you have decided, then I would tell you it's important for you to understand what your belief structure is that's outside of yourself. Because if it's an internal perspective, like you have the idea of what's right and wrong, remember, it's only going to be gauged on the history of your nature and nurture. It's going to be very difficult to, you're going to tend to be right. Like, it's really hard not to always want to be right if you're gauging it against yourself or how you're feeling. And there's far more people on this planet, so I would say maybe find something that's outside of yourself that helps you sort of balance that. Okay, so for me, mine would be the Bible. Okay. Now, as far as the Bible is concerned, the thing is that a lot of times we get information of the Bible based on the translation or how someone else translates the word for themselves. And I do personally, that's hard because it's hard to always know the heart of a person. You usually have to spend some time with them and watch their life, and like there's a lot of stuff that kind of has to go into trusting whether or not the information they're giving you is good or not, or if they're trying to get something out of it that's not necessarily good. So it's important to have that gauge before you start listening to people. And I'm fully aware that I'm telling you information without maybe you having that. So that's why I'm telling you up front, you really need to know this for yourself. So hopefully I'm giving you some information that will help you do this on your own. When you're reading the Bible and you're looking at it, just one of the big things is to make sure that you're reading it for yourself and not anyone else. That can be a big problem. If you're reading it for other people, it always seems to apply like the worst stuff. Like, oh, well, he's going to reap what he sows. The only problem with seeing it that way, like, well, they'll reap what they sow, is that any judgment that you call down on other people, no matter how you look at this, whether you believe in the Bible or not, no matter what judgment you call down on other people is the judgment you call down on yourself. So if you tell other people, you're going to reap what you sow, well, the truth is you're going to reap. Now I'm going to reap what I sow. And I got to be honest with you, I don't really want to, there's a lot of times I don't really want to reap what I sow. So I try. And I'm telling you this not with any arrogance or anything. I really try not to put that off on people. Like, I already got enough of that to deal with on my own. I don't really want to put that on others. And I'll tell you that a lot of that left me, here we are back at forgiveness. When I forgave people and I recognized we're all in the same boat, it started to be easier not to judge. So I read the Bible different. I was able to read it for myself. I wasn't thinking of some other person when I was reading about, oh yeah, reap what they sow. Yeah, I know who he's talking about right there. I usually thought, oh, he's talking about me. Like when I read the story of the woman who had been accused of committing adultery, I had to see myself as though I had to see myself in that story as that woman. As much I saw myself as a victim, but I also had to see myself as the Pharisee. And then I also had to see myself being someone who could be like Jesus and step in the middle of those two and love them both and possibly bring peace to a situation. And I don't know. It's just, I find it to be probably the best way that I have read the word. Also, you don't want to trust other people's translation of it until you have a good grasp on it yourself to some degree, or at least you've read it for yourself, because, there's some Bible verses out there that people use to sort of spread the concept that women shouldn't preach or that they don't have a place for that. And that's kind of a ridiculous sentiment, because if you don't know anything, and I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes, but if I am, good, because a good challenge is good. But if you think that, then you probably haven't really read it and you don't understand it historically. And that's not a judgment. I'm not judging. I'm just saying you probably don't understand, because at the time, Paul was referencing something that was already happening in the temple, and he was trying to work within that. And his implication wasn't that men should be speaking in church and women shouldn't. He was saying that it was rude when other people were talking to be talking out loud. So, and that's just one perspective, and there's more to it than that. And if you have questions about it, please ask. I'd love to talk about it. So anyway, going back to kind of looking at it from someone else's perspective instead of my own, I noticed that it'd be easier for me to talk about other people's stuff when I got no stake in the game. It is so much easier for me to tell you what you need to do, because it doesn't ultimately affect me, because it isn't my problem. But I feel as if I've done something by pointing out your problem and tell you what you need to do, as if I have an answer. Because what makes me as a human being feel more elated and excited than ever is to be right. I was right. I can tell you how to live your life. That makes me a good person, because I can tell what you're doing wrong and I can fix that. Well, that's not really my job. So it never worked. So it still doesn't work. And I'm a counselor. So I'm telling you right now, I do not fix people's problems. So if you were ever thinking of coming to me because you thought I could, you'd be wrong, because that's not what I do. I try to help people point out the truths that they're already revealing in their life, but I do not tell people what to do. Much to the chagrin or the disappointment to many people who come to see me. They're like, "You're not going to tell me what to do?" No, I will not, because I may like it too much. Here's the truth. It's easier for me to focus on your problem because I don't want to deal with mine. That hurt, because that's really true. I spent a lot of time in my old life, in my old spiritual life and all of that really brought me down was when I was focusing on everybody else's problem. My pastor didn't do this. My friends didn't do this. The church isn't like this. These people didn't do that. Like, I was always focused on that stuff. And then one day it was just enough. I am responsible for me. If I believe what the Bible says, it says I'm the church. So it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing, because I'm only responsible for my part. So that's why I'm sharing these videos. So that's why I don't dislike anybody. Like, as far as I know, I mean, you can test me on it. As far as I know, I don't. I try desperately. And I'm going to use the word desperately, because the result of the life that I have now is so much better than the life I had before. So I don't really want to focus on anyone else's life. It's too much work. And I mean, it's just too much work, and I don't have the capacity. I just don't have the capacity, because I don't know about you, but I got way too many problems to even be thinking about anybody else's problems. I'm 48 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. I'm not trying to be like dramatic here, but I don't know how much time I have left. I really need to focus on getting my life together. And if the truth is that I can't change anyone, well, there you go. I can't change anyone. So why would I focus on everybody else's stuff? Anyway, but now I want to deal with my problems. So I am looking up my problems, my ideas, my perspectives, what things mean, how I treat others, etc. in the Bible, because I already told you that my way did not work. So I'm doing another way. So technically Here we are. About 5 or so years ago, I began to look up stuff in the Bible for how to live, especially if I was confused or something just wasn't getting the result I was looking for. And so far, it's working. I felt happier when I read it. I see the world bigger. I'm more open-minded. I care about people and myself. I find purpose and simplicity in life. But one of the biggest ways that I get a gauge for right or wrong is, do I follow Christ's example? Okay, that's the next one. I mean, it gives a whole new meaning to WWJD. Remember back in the 90s, what would Jesus do? How did he treat people? What did he say? What was his character? Like, why did he ask questions and not answer so many of them? I find that he was kind. He was kind beyond understanding. Like I said, he asked more questions than he answered, and that he lived and he let live. Now that's heavy, because a lot of people really feel like that's not our way, but he did not spend a lot of time hassling people about what he thought that they were doing wrong. He would talk to the people who wanted to talk to him. He didn't really spend a lot of time on people who had no interest in what he had to say. And he was pretty clear about he did spend time with what they called sinners, but he spent a lot of time with everyone and anyone because he loved people. So I find that, nowadays it seems to be popular to sort of let people who don't believe the way that we do tell them all the things that they're doing wrong, and their gauge is not the same. So how can we do that? Like, what would be the point of that? Why would that make anyone excited about following Jesus? It does say in the Bible that the way that people will want to follow Jesus is by the way we treat each other. That's all I'm going to say about that. I am not indicting anyone, and I'm not trying to be anybody's condemnation. I'm just telling you that that's what we are gauged off of. That's how people see us. He never forced anyone to do anything. He gave so many opportunities for healings, to receive love, find purpose and relationship with him, and he allowed others to get as close to them as they wanted. He didn't judge, even though he actually could, because he had never done anything wrong based on God's gauge and of loving God and loving others. I want to be like that. I do. I really do. It is so challenging, but being challenged makes me feel alive. It just makes me feel so alive. I just had never, and I don't mean that I hadn't been challenged because I'm so smart. I mean, I had never been challenged because I was a victim. And for some reason, the world does not challenge victims. So I was just a charity case. Everybody felt sorry for me, and they always told me, oh, you can do it. You're doing good. Like, I never got challenged. But this word of God, it challenges me, and it makes me feel alive, and it makes me feel like I can grow, and it makes me feel like I can do more and more in this world. And that's something that I have never received from another human being. Being bored or confused or dismissed or a victim or tolerated or rejected or abandoned or controlled makes me feel like I'm dying. I just don't want to live like that anymore. And I won't. I have decided, and listen, I'll tell you the truth. This, which I already am telling you the truth, but it's just what I should say is I'm about to get vulnerable. I didn't really want to do another video. I've already told you that pretty much every time I don't. But I have been struggling with a bad mood, but I know in my heart that this is more important than my bad mood, even though I really feel really drawn to the bad mood. Like I really wanted to stay in bed and I still wanted to yell at everybody and I still wanted to be really cranky. But I'm like, no, this is so much more important than that. So even I can even fight a bad mood now. I mean, I don't know if that resonates with any of y'all, but before I could never fight with a bad mood. I'm just in a bad mood. Now, I'm not telling you that I didn't keep it for a little bit, but this morning it changed because I have been given an option. I find that to be so challenging. And again, told you, makes me feel alive. So I told you, I don't want to live that way anymore. And according to how Jesus lived, I don't have to. So I don't. And so I'm not going to. So the next thing is to be fully convinced in your own mind. Research and find stuff out, of course. I don't want anybody going, oh, well, if you think it, then it's true. No, that's not what I'm saying. Make sure you're fully convinced that you really believe what you're saying. And it's not just because it's easier, because your feelings go along with it, but you're fully convinced of something. Because here's the thing. In James 1, it actually tells us that, you consider things a gift when trials and tribulations come to you from all sides, because then you get to find out how strong your faith actually is. So if you find out how strong your faith, the way you will find out how strong your faith actually is that when you start getting challenged by your thought process, do you just decide you're right, or do you check and make sure that you are? And that's how you can be fully convinced in your mind, or at least in the direction of being fully convinced. I didn't want to just say I knew something because it was popular opinion or because I wanted to be right. I mean, it's just not enough for me anymore. I like the feeling of being right, but it's just not enough anymore. The feeling of being right because I'm saying I am, that's so dumb. Like, I can't just be right. How can that be true? Because if you just take a step back and everyone thinks they're right, but they're not all saying the same thing, well, wouldn't that ultimately mean that someone is or no one is? I mean, I'm not trying to get too deep here, but how could I always be right? How could that be? And I'm calling myself dumb. I'm not telling everybody else that they are. I want to do right. I want to do right. I don't want to just be right anymore because it's not enough. It didn't change anything. It didn't get rid of my depression. It didn't get rid of my anxiety and my disappointment and disillusionment and frustration. It just didn't get rid of all that. But doing right has changed a lot. And it is a challenge. It honestly, like I told you, it just has made me feel so alive. So if the Bible doesn't have something written down exactly, that's okay. Because I follow the principles of the Bible. Like, love God with every part of who you are and love others the way you would love yourself. Okay? So, like, if you base a lot of stuff off of that, but you need to know what that's really like and what that would look like. And if you don't know what it looks like now, I'll give you a little hint. It's not going to feel the same when you do. So if you're still feeling the same and you're saying, oh, well, now I love myself, but you're not treating people kindly, then your gauge is probably off. If you have no friends, if you don't like people, your gauge is off. And I'm just telling you those were my experiences. If you say things like, God just, he told me it's fine. That's sometimes that's a cop-out, just so that for me, it was a cop-out so that I didn't have to, go a little deeper on my own stuff. So, not saying it's happening, I'm just telling you that's one way that you can kind of check and see where you're at. I check my own heart, and then I also ask God to show it to me. That's the challenging part, because I always want to say I'm doing stuff right. But again, how could that always be true? Most of the time, how can it be true? I am not always right, especially since the Bible says we are rarely, if ever, right. Well, that applies to me as much as it applies to anybody else. So I have to gauge myself against that truth. I pray about it and I wait and rest in the answer that's coming. That is also challenging. I mean, if you're looking around right now or you're experiencing what I'm experiencing, you're probably aware of the waiting and resting in that truth. So I'm going to give you a couple of important notes right here. You can be convicted about stuff that other people aren't, or vice versa. So I don't always share my convictions with others. I just live them out. That's the best way I've found to do it, because telling people my conviction as a foundational truth makes me have expectations that aren't for me to gauge. I have a theory that this is one of the biggest ways pastors, preachers, spiritual leaders get themselves in trouble, is because they tell people their own personal conviction as certifiable foundational truth and then are disappointed or judgmental when it doesn't happen or people don't follow along with it. And even when they don't mean it that way, many times I find that people who are listening to them will start to hide what they are doing because they fear being judged or even criticized. So you may say, well, if they didn't think it was wrong, they wouldn't hide it. But I would say that many times people hide things out of fear of consequence, much like children. And it's not because they think they're wrong. It's because they don't want to get caught. So it's not an internal struggle necessarily. But it could be the other way too, so you might be right. It could be that they're hiding it because they know they're wrong also. Another important note, don't condemn someone for choosing not to participate with you in something that you think is perfectly acceptable. So I'm going to use a big Southern thing, drinking, the drink. I mean, if your friend doesn't want to drink and you say it's fine, relax. They don't have to drink. It's a little weird that you're trying to make them do it anyway. If they don't think I grew up in a place, like I had a friend who went to school with me and she couldn't wear pants, like relax. I'm not trying to convince her that she's got to wear jeans to be acceptable. I'm saying I'm not doing that now. When I was a kid, I probably did. But I mean, like, relax. If that's your deal, it's your deal. And you got to work that out on your own. And I only bring this up because, the South and how funny we are about the drink. People have to walk out their own life and their own path with God. They are the only ones that will stand before God one day for themselves. So why should we make it harder for them? I'm learning to love people from where I am to where they are. We're in the same boat. I may be yelling across the boat, but we're still in the same boat. Because it is the best I can give. And no one can give better than their best. Okay, and that's where we will end today. Please reach out or share your stories, ideas, comments, or questions if you have any questions about what we've talked about. We have one more part to healing, which I will release on Monday. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening and helping me and others pay healing forward. Thank you.